You use pounds or kilograms when you want to measure your produce, and you'll use miles or kilometers when you want to measure a distance. And of course, when you want to measure the size of a Lego set, you'll use piece count. The only difference, of course, is that using pounds to measure produce and miles to measure distance makes sense. Using the piece count, and by extension the price per piece, to determine the value of a Lego set does not. Now, don't get me wrong. Price per piece absolutely still has its place, sometimes even when you are talking about value, and I'll get into more of what that is later, but I think that for the most part, price per piece should be relegated to more of an interesting side note than the end-all be-all which determines the value of a set. And I know, whether you believe in price per piece or not, you've all heard the argument, not all pieces are created equal. And really, that's all that it is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's more complicated than it needs to be. Just because a set comes with more pieces does not mean that it is more valuable. But sometimes, just understanding what your opponent is trying to say in theory doesn't always do it. So, what I will do, however, is give you guys a few good examples to illustrate the futility of price per piece. If you came into this video as a supporter of using price per piece, by the end of this thing, you will not be. So, jumping in with a splash, the Imperial Armored Marauder has more pieces than the 2020 Sith TIE Fighter. You can try all you want, but you will never convince me that just because this Marauder has more pieces than the 2020 TIE means that the TIE should be cheaper. This TIE Fighter 100% deserves to be about double the price of the Marauder. There's a lot of empty space between the wings, yes, but the wings are also pretty big themselves. The midi-scale Falcon from last year comes with more pieces than Krennic's Shuttle. I think that we can all agree that Krennic's Shuttle is much larger and 100% deserves a higher price. We have the same deal with Jabba's Sail Barge here. Jabba's Sail Barge comes with less pieces than this midi-scale Falcon. Despite that, I think that it is perfectly reasonable to assert that Jabba's Sail Barge is more expensive, both to manufacture and to buy, because it has larger pieces. Or take the Ambush on Ferrix set, which has more pieces than the 2015 Sith Infiltrator. And yeah, the Ambush on Ferrix comes with an extra speeder bike build, but so does the Sith Infiltrator, plus a few extra things. I think it's pretty easy to see that the Sith Infiltrator 100% deserves to be more expensive than the Ambush on Ferrix was. Ambush on Ferrix also came with more pieces than the 2018 Imperial Landing Craft, the 2016 U-Wing, and the 2021 Mandalorian Starfighter. And as I'm sure you can tell, it is smaller than every single one of those. Now, fun fact, the midi-scale Falcon actually has more pieces than Ambush on Ferrix, which means that the midi-scale Falcon has more pieces than every single one of those sets that we just looked at. And I would say that the midi-scale Falcon definitely does not deserve to have the same price point that the U-Wing or the Sith Infiltrator do. If you want to look at the extreme end of things, the UCS Falcon has around 3,000 more pieces than the UCS Star Destroyer does. And sure, the interior of the ISD has more empty space than the Falcon, but that doesn't change the fact that it does still have some regions of pretty high density and just generally uses much larger pieces. All in all, what I'm trying to say is that if you're using price per piece to help you determine whether or not to buy a set, you're missing out on some good sets. There absolutely are many sets that are very much overpriced, but it is not because of the price per piece ratio. Now, earlier I mentioned that sometimes using the price per piece ratio does make sense. The context in which it makes sense is the future, specifically when you're talking about rumors. When you're dealing with rumors, the price per piece ratio can help you gauge the likelihood that a set is going to be overpriced or not. For example, when you have a $150 UT-AT rumored to come with 800 pieces, that is a little bit worrisome, not because it's overpriced right now, but because it has a higher chance of being overpriced because, well, I don't really see them using a lot of really big pieces on a UTAT. It can always go the other way, like when we were hearing about a $170 justifier for 1,022 pieces. That was also troublesome, but it came out and it used some very large pieces. Granted, it probably could have stood to be $10 or $15 cheaper. Overall, not egregiously overpriced. On the flip side of that coin, hearing about a 1,000 piece Dagobah set for only $80 was really great, and then it came out and, well, they're all just tiny little tile stud size pieces. So, I don't know. Chances are, if you made it this far into the video, then you agreed with everything that I've said, and I'm basically just preaching to the choir here, so maybe I didn't really get to the audience that I wanted to get to with this one, but that's okay. If you did make it this far in the video, that means that maybe you will agree with more of my takes on LEGO Star Wars, this thing that we love, which means that maybe you should check the end screen out, or the end screen videos, and watch one of them.